Over the course of the last year, I have been slowly and painfully going through everything in Action 52, one of the worst games ever made. And partway through that and towards the end of it, I determined that simply playing through all the games wasn't going to be good enough. I was going to have to end on some kind of finale, reviewing all of them or coming up with some kind of just way to finally bring it all to a close. And so the logical thing to do was to do some kind of top 5 or top 10 worst games of Action 52 list. But there's so many ways that they can be bad. It's hard to really pin down. So several videos ago, I came up with a few categories and had people vote on them. I counted up the votes and put them all in a list, and also used my own personal opinion. Whenever there was a game that got voted on very often, I always made sure to give that one kind of the top spot. If there were times where I disagreed with it, I'll let you know. But basically, this is my full compilation of the best of the worst of Action 52. We're going to have a top 5 for each category. Some of them are going to have honorable mentions. It's going to be something special, I hope. But just keep in mind, this is not my usual video format. I've never really done a top 5 type of thing before. I'm not really a reviewer, so if the formatting on this is going to be a little bit weird, then I apologize. Hopefully it'll still be interesting, though. And also keep in mind, this is only for the NES version. None of the Genesis games are going to be showing up in this. I didn't spend as much time on those. They're not really as well known. And Cheetah Men 2 is also not in here because it's its own separate thing. It's basically just an extension of the original Cheetah Men. It's just as bad as the original, honestly. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started here. So the first category is going to be most boring. We're just going to go through these from the 5th spot to the 1st spot with an honorable mention if there is one. So, coming in at number 5, we have Fire Breathers, the first game in the entire collection and the only one that is 2-player only. If you are playing it in single player, there is basically no gameplay. You can move your dragon around, you can shoot the other dragon, but that's it. Nothing's going to get in your way. There's no obstacles, nothing else firing at you. There's no gameplay. Even if you are playing 2-player, I can't imagine it would be that fun. It's about as simplistic as it can get. Number 4, Storm Over the Desert. This is a game in which you very, very slowly move your tank around and shoot at stuff on screen. That's about it. There's no shortage of shooting games in Action 52, including several that are of the move an object around in any direction and shoot stuff that randomly spawns genre. Storm Over the Desert, although different from most of them because it's not set in space or just with inexplicable objects, is probably the worst of the bunch just due to your extremely slow movement speed. Number 3, we have a tie between Jupiter Scope and Spreadfire. These games are both very similar. In Jupiter Scope, you are on the bottom of the screen and you shoot at things coming down at you, and there's no penalty if you miss them. In Spreadfire, it's basically the same thing, except you're a lobster this time. Both of them also have far too many stages, no real sense of progression other than the things moving faster. I can't see why anybody in their right mind would ever play either of these games for more than 2 minutes. I say this having played through both of them for far longer than that, but that's because I was dedicated to seeing the end, and on both of those, I'm fairly sure that I actually did not get through to the end just due to sheer boredom. Number 4, we have Shooting Gallery. Basically the exact same type of gameplay as the previous slot, Jupiter Scope and Spreadfire. This one functionally plays the same way, except it's even more boring, because while those are at least set in some kind of spacey shooting at alien ships or incoming meteor type of like action-y setting. This is literally just you're shooting at targets in a carnival. A very poorly realized carnival, but yeah, that's basically what it is. Pay no attention to the fact that the targets that you're shooting at can actually leave the confines of their area and come down and touch you and you die. But aside from that, it's about as basic as it can get. And before we move into number 1, we have our honorable mention for most boring, and it's going to be Slashers. This is a game in which you walk across a rooftop or possibly a subway, depending on the level, and beat people up. Beating people up consists of raising your fist and stomping your foot repeatedly while the opponent does the same, and you hope that they take damage more than you do. There's basically nothing else you can do to ensure victory here. I'm going to consider this one most boring because there is absolutely no strategy. All you do is you move right, you wait for an enemy to get in your way, you mash at the button until they die, you continue for a couple steps, and it repeats. Absolutely no variety. Nothing you can do to change it up. It's completely up to luck if you win. And number 1, for most boring, we have Sharks. I described this one in the video as sometimes there's sharks, usually there's not sharks. I didn't make that one up myself, it came from some other review, but that's pretty accurate for this one. It's, honestly quite similar to the other move around freely and shoot at stuff games, except this one's set in the ocean instead of space, and the things that you're shooting at very rarely show up. The hit detection is very questionable, and oftentimes they'll disappear before you can hit them. And as with the other games that go on for far too long, this game has about 5 million levels. There's never really any difference other than the addition of jellyfish, which are even more annoying to kill than the sharks. And yeah, that's about it. Alright, our next category, we have Weirdest. Action 52 is no slouch when it comes to having weird games in it. A lot of them don't really make any sense, but these are the ones that make the least sense, as voted on. Number 5, Crazy Shuffle. One of the many move around and shoot at random things games, except this one, all of the objects, including yourself, are basically microscopic, and you can't really tell what they're supposed to be. Certain objects in the background will kill you for no reason, because you can't tell what they are. And that's pretty much what this one is. Just, it's like somebody vomited on the screen and made sprites out of it, and you control the sprites, and you try to figure out what's going on, and probably fail in the process. Number 4, Illuminator. This is one of several games in the collection that I would just consider sort of an arcade-style game. It's the kind where it's not specifically a shooter or a platformer or anything, but it's just kind of like a one-screen Donkey Kong-esque, like, go around and do stuff game. It's not Donkey Kong-esque in any sense, other than it's just one screen. But in this one, there's vampires that show up periodically, and you shoot them with your flashlight, and when you do so, the screen will light up for a few seconds. Whenever that's not the case, it is pitch black and you can't see anything. So this raises several questions. 1, why is this room so dark when it has all these lamps hanging everywhere? 2, why are the vampires dying from a flashlight? 3, why does killing the vampires briefly light up the room? And 4, why am I playing this game? All of these questions may never have an answer, but it brings us to number 4 on the list. Number 3, we have Non-Human. In this game, the character you play as, I've seen described as Mozart with a hang glider. I mostly just see it as an origami mess. It's like somebody just kind of folded up some paper and hoped that it resembled a living being, and it didn't really work, but they went with it anyway. And of course, the bottom third of the screen is just taken up by these terrifying green faces with star-shaped sunglasses and fangs. No explanation as to why they're there. They have nothing to do with what's going on, not that you could really tell what is going on, just given the random assortment of enemies in the stage. But, this is the whole game. It's one stage. You move this weird character over these weird faces, and avoid weird enemies. Again, pure nonsense. Number 2, we have Myong. This one is probably the most inexplicable game in the entire collection. People have analyzed how this one works, and it still doesn't really make any sense. So, you take your Action 52 icon, which I've also seen described as like an acid-induced Christmas tree, and you just move it across a board and hope to not die. Things that kill you include standing around for too long, moving into a square that has an animation of it disappearing, even if it's not disappearing at the time. Moving into a square that has nothing special about it. Probably a few other things. The only way that you can actually win this game is either through pure luck, or by stopping and constantly scanning your surroundings to see which tiles in front of you have animations that might play, and hoping that you just don't die from touching the wrong one. Except you also can't sit around for too long, because that'll kill you too. This one is weird in the sense that nobody could explain what's going on here. I did my best and it still didn't really make sense. It's a puzzle game, and puzzle games don't often make sense. If you're playing Tetris, you're just guiding blocks and they're disappearing. That doesn't make any sense in a real-world context either, I realize. But I still have no idea what Myong is supposed to be, and why it was made. And for the honorable mention in the weirdest category, we have a tie between Rocket Jock and Space Dreams, 2 of the 400 different space shooters in this game. Except these are the ones that tried to be different, and in the process just ended up being extremely unusual. So for Rocket Jock, you're a cowboy riding on a rocket, shooting at space cows. And in Space Dreams, you are a pacifier shooting stars at baby-related items. Both of these basically look like they were originally a typical space shooter, like G-Force Fighter, Megalonia, Atmos Quake, Star Evil, one of the other 17 that exist. But then they realized, we've got too many of these, we can only have 10 of them be the same. Let's make these a little bit different, so they just changed the objects around for arbitrary things and hope that nobody would notice. That's the only thing I can think of. And for the number 1 in weirdest, voted on by far the most, this was the clear winner of the bunch, we have Time Warp Tickers. Was there really any doubt that this one would win? So, as a recap, this is a game in which you are a pair of fingers, cut off at the wrist, walking along the Wacky Land episode of Looney Tunes with upside-down doors and floating objects, and you're avoiding just a bunch of enemies that appear and disappear at will and have no relation to their surroundings. It's very clearly meant to be druggy, so it's not the kind of thing where it's just like, what were they thinking? But I mean, they succeeded. They wanted to make a weird game, and they made a really weird game. The game has other faults besides just being weird, such as the fact that it's impossible to play through due to bad hit detection and poor enemy placement, but that's beside the point. The game is weird, and that's it. For our next category, let's look at something a little bit more positive for a change. This is going to be the best graphics. So, number 5 for best graphics, we have Bits and Pieces, and judging from the fact that this is our number 5, I think that kind of says something for Action 52 as a whole, because these graphics are not particularly good. We have werewolves with diapers, we have just generic-ish zombies, and whatever the hell these are supposed to be. I would not call these good graphics by any means, but it was voted on, I felt like I should include it, and after having looked through the rest of the games a second time, I really couldn't find anything that I would put above this, other than the 4 that I did. Shut up. Okay, so moving on. Number 4, we have Haunted Halls, or Haunted Hills, or whatever this game is called. This one, while not as bad as Bits and Pieces, I still wouldn't necessarily call high-quality graphics, but it is a bit above the usual Action 52 schlock. The character, although often referred to as just Boob Lady or just something equally derogative, you can at least tell what you're playing as, unless it really is just supposed to be like a Fabio-esque person with huge pecs, in which case they didn't get that across well, and I redact this position. But no, this one's okay looking, aside from the enemies. The enemies still look really stupid, but the backgrounds are okay, like some of these chains and stuff and bricks. Like, there was at least some effort put into this. It looks passable. Number 3, Cheetah Men. Cheetah Men is the game that obviously took the most effort out of the collection, the one that they hoped to kind of turn into its own series, and so they did put a little bit of effort into this one. As with basically every other game on this list, I'm gonna say I would not call it a good-looking game in its own right, but it's good by comparison. The character sprites are decent. The backgrounds are slightly less decent. The enemies are just recycled from other games, so I wouldn't even count those. It has a title screen and like an intro sequence with graphics that exist. That's about all I can say about it, really. I don't know, like I said, we're really stretching for quality on this one. So, number 2, we have Ninja Assault. This one wins in the graphic department purely because they attempted to actually do something with it, which is more than can be said about most of the other games where no attempt was put into making them look reasonable. This one, although the sprites themselves are not all that great, they attempted reflections, and they included details such as the fire blowing in the wind on the second stage, which is very surprising to me. So the fact that they actually took the extra steps to do that gives it the second slot. Does it actually look better than Cheetah Men or Haunted Halls? That's debatable. I'm going to probably say not really, but they did put in the extra details, and I think that kind of gives it the extra point. And so, unlike the previous categories, this one does not actually get an honorable mention because I could not find a single other game other than these 5 that really deserved to be listed under best graphics. There's some that don't look like absolute diarrhea, but yeah, that I didn't even want to put Bits and Pieces on the list. It was a stretch, so no more honorable mentions for this one. So we're just going to go straight to number 1, which is Billy Bob. And as with every other game listed here, if I was to compare this to your typical NES game, I would still probably consider it under par, but it has fluid animations, and no other game in this does. And so, for that reason alone, I think Billy Bob deserves the number 1 spot, because they did put some effort into the animation. It doesn't look like complete garbage. So, good job, Billy Bob, you win. So next here we've got a category that's going to kind of be breaking the format a little bit just due to the variety of votes and the vague nature of the category that it was in the first place. So we have noteworthy music and sound. I say noteworthy instead of best because some of these are going to be good for ironic reasons, as we'll see very shortly. So let's start with the ones that are legitimately, like, at least okay. Like, I still hesitate to say good. There's a couple that are good, but starting with the ones that are good, we have the music from Ooze. It's very repetitive. It's not all that pleasant to listen to, but it is actually kind of catchy, surprisingly, especially if you end up playing the game for a long time. So I think Ooze deserves the number 4 spot. And yeah, there's only 4 spots for this one, because like I said, this is going to be really weird formatting on this one. Number 3, we have time warp tickers. This one just always makes me think of the clip from AVGN whenever I hear this song, because he starts up the game, it just plays the little ditty, and then it just cuts to a face of him, like a shot of him reacting in horrified realization of what he's gotten into. But the song itself is actually not that bad. As I was composing this list, I put this one on here and listened to the song. Didn't really remember how long it actually went on for before it looped, and came to realize that it is fairly catchy, and it actually ended up getting stuck in my head like most of the next day at work. So it's got that going for it. It's using kind of a typical like surfer music riff. I don't know if surfer music's the best way to put it, but it sounds fairly like 50s-ish. Kind of sounds like the retro hippie from Earthbound music too. It's a decent little tune. And so number 2, we have Fuzz Power. Again, just kind of a decent little catchy tune. It's incredibly stupid sounding. I like making fun of it, but it holds up. Apparently they liked it enough to make it the title, like the intro sequence for Cheetah Men 2. So again, not really much I can say about this. I'm not a music reviewer. I just think it's a decent tune. Number 1, to probably nobody's surprise, we have Cheetah Men. I've seen the Cheetah Men song referred to in a few places as the only good thing to come out of Action 52, and other than just ironic enjoyment of the awfulness of the game, I can probably agree with that, because this is actually a pretty good song. I've heard remixes of it. Like, it holds up well on its own. I still think Cheetah Men probably could have benefited from having more than one song in it between all of its stages and the entire second game, but that's another matter entirely. The song is decent enough. No complaints here. So for the other half of this category, those were the 4 like good ones. Here's the 4 less good. And so I don't even know if the placement of the list for these is going to make all that much sense. I'm just going to kind of throw them in here. So we're not even going to bother numbering them. But here's just 4 more weird music and sound instances, I guess. I don't know what else to call it. So first up, we have Ninja Assault. The digitized voice is the entire reason it made it onto this list. It's incredibly stupid sounding. It's possibly the only instance of that in the game, other than the low grumbling the cheetah men make. It just sounds incredibly out of place and hilarious, and I love it. Next we have Manchester, and I'm sure you know exactly why this one is on the list, because the actual music in the game is not all that noteworthy, but the noise that you make when you jump is. Reminder for those who don't remember. That's all it needs. It's good enough. Next up we have Lollipops. This is another game in which there's a stupid jumping sound effect, although this one is a bit more stock in terms of Action 52 noises. It's not quite as noteworthy, but where Lollipops really shines is in the incredibly glitched third level, in which the sound, the music that plays is basically just garbage data being read and making horrible, horrible noises. Here's a sample. And so through no intentional work on the programmer's part, due to this just being a glitch reacting in an unusual way, Lollipops has secured its role in having really weird music in this list, I guess. So good for it. And the last one in this category is going to be Silver Sword, almost purely because it's an incredibly short and stupid loop, and there's plenty of songs in this collection that are like this, but this one just stands out to me as being particularly annoying. Okay, so next up on our list, we have the category for glitchiest. This one is, this was pretty fun because a lot of the games in this are incredibly glitchy. That's kind of just one of the noteworthy things about Action 52 in general. And picking the worst of the bunch was, you had to kind of narrow a lot of stuff down. So let's just go ahead and get started here. Number 5, we have Star Evil. And this is not actually referring to the block placed at the beginning of the level, because that is incredibly poor design, but that's not actually a glitch. I assume they did intend that to be there. Instead, this game gets on the list because of two different things. One, sometimes the boss at the end of the stage doesn't actually load in, meaning that you're soft locked and have to reset the game. I am not entirely sure what decides this, if this will happen. It probably has to do with how many sprites are on screen, but as far as I'm concerned, it's random, and so if you're actually trying to play this game legitimately for whatever reason, good luck with that. And the other reason is because as soon as you clear stage 3, I think, I'll have to check the footage, the game just dies. It doesn't return you to the main menu. It doesn't loop you back to the beginning of the first stage again. It dies. They forgot to program a level in, or rather they put a level in but they didn't code it properly and it doesn't really load. So good job, Star Evil. Number 4, we have Ninja Assault. This game is probably the one with the most variety out of the entire collection, and due to that, it's somehow even less polished than a lot of them. The first stage functions pretty much as you'd expect it to. So does the second, although the wind is a little bit weird. Third stage, however, is when the real shit starts coming in because of the incredibly poor hit detection on the platforms. Again, I could argue that this isn't a glitch and that this is just poor design. I'm going to say it's a little bit of both because I feel like the hit detection on these platforms just doesn't work the way it's supposed to. But no, the real glitch comes in the fourth level, where everything just kind of falls apart, and that's it. The game just dies. You reach level 4, the game dies. They didn't think anybody would get that far, probably. Honestly, they probably didn't get that far. They didn't notice the glitch because nobody got this far to find out. That's what I'm going to guess is the case here. Number 3, we have Atmos Quake. Again, one of the 4 million space shooters here. This one is noteworthy because of the fact that, although the first 4 levels are perfectly normal, the 5th one spawns you inside of a wall and you die immediately. So, does really anything else have to be said? There's no way to get out of this. The game just basically kills you as your reward for getting to level 5. Bad design or glitch? I'm gonna go with glitch. Number 2, we have Lollipops. This one's already been mentioned earlier. As you get to level 3, the entire game basically breaks down, and you have an incredibly messed up background song, plus just graphics that don't quite work. And even aside from that, the player sprite just turns into a pile of garbage whenever you die anyway, even if you're not in the 3rd level. So, very clearly not a lot of love and care was put into Lollipops. Honorable mention for this one's going to be a little bit different from some of the others. We have Thrusters. Again, just sort of a generic space shooter. But while I was playing this one, the only thing that I encountered that would really be considered a glitch was when you touch the right side of the screen, you die for no reason. When I saw that this one got voted on, I rewatched my video of it and I played a little bit of it again. And I'm like, I don't know why this one would be here. And I was actually going to throw this one out entirely. And then I looked at the AVGN review and noticed that when he dies and respawns, the graphics kind of have
a fucking seizure.
So while it didn't happen to me, I know that it can happen. So it gets a badge of honor for being shittily made. And number 1 in glitchiest, we have Billy Bob. Second place, or second time being number 1 on this list. And I don't know if it's entirely fair for it to be, if I'm going to be completely honest, because the thing that happened to get it this honorable placement is something that might only just be a problem with the particular ROM I'm using. But regardless, when I played Billy Bob, I got through to the end of the 2nd level, and it warped me randomly into the middle of Cheetah Men. For absolutely no reason. And I think that's a special level of weird programming, because it didn't just take me to the wrong level. Like, I know in Cheetah Men sometimes, like, the name of the level is mislabeled, or you can, like... I know in Cheetah Men 2, sometimes you can start up the game and it'll just start you in level 5, which is, like, the only way to reach it. And weird stuff like that, but this is a case of one game leading into another one, and I just think that's amazing. Alright, so once again, moving into something that's less negative, we're going to have our next category be Most Playable. These are the games in Action 52 that if you are absolutely stuck with having to play this for an extended period of time, and you didn't want to completely drive yourself insane, these would be the ones that you'd probably want to play, just because they'd give you the least awful experience. So, in the number 5 spot, we have Dam Busters. I'm actually surprised this one got votes. Dam Busters is one of those games that just never really stood out that much to me, but I mainly remember it for the fact that you can soft lock yourself by going the wrong way and then having the screen scroll and not letting you get back. So, not exactly a point for playability there, but as long as you pay attention to where you're going and don't walk into any dead ends, the game does function. As with basically every other game on this list, I wouldn't call it fun, but it performs as it's supposed to. Mostly. It doesn't lock up, nothing glitches out, It doesn't have really bad hit detection or anything. It mostly just works like a game. So number 4, we're going to have a tie between Crybaby and Chill Out. These are two more of the arcade-style games like Streamers, where you basically just move around on a single screen and do stuff. In Crybaby, you squirt milk at random gangsters doing the electric slide and garlic. And in Chill Out, you throw snowballs at the ice climbers. Both of the games, again, pretty much function the way they're supposed to. I'm going to be saying that for all of these, I apologize. But of the games of this particular category, these two stand out above Illuminator, which has problems with enemy spawning and just not being able to see what you're doing. Evil Empire, in which everything is too small and enemies spawn in places where you can't kill them and block ladders. And Underground, which has that same issue, enemies spawning where you can't deal with them. So, these two win out. Number 3, we have Mash Man. I always forget what this game is based off of its title. I always confuse it with Fuzz Power. But in Mash Man, you have a very large sprite, and you just kind of go to the right and jump over stuff. And that's basically the entire game. I'm going to consider this one most playable because out of the various platformers in this collection, this one actually seems to function the best, surprisingly. And I'm going to put that above Cheetah Men because even though Cheetah Men has slightly more polish, it's also a bit more bullshit because it has poor enemy spawning, stuff that you can't avoid, it has various glitches in it. Mash Man is pretty much as plain as you can get. You jump over the stuff that's in your way, you keep going. It's pretty much like bits and pieces, but with less enemies. So it's... Again, it's not fun. No one would enjoy playing this, but it is playable, technically. So number 2, we've got Sombreros. This is another one that just kind of functions as it's supposed to. It's kind of surprising. It's like Silver Sword in the sense that you just kind of move upwards and get to the end of the stage. But while in Silver Sword, you were just constantly swarmed by annoying enemies that you couldn't really predict where they were going to appear or where they were going to go. You usually couldn't kill them. Sombreros doesn't really have that issue. You just kind of go along your way, you get to the end of the stage, and then you do a new stage. It works. Honorable mention, we have Streamers. I felt like I had to put this one on here because out of all the games in Action 52, I would probably consider this one the most fun. It is still... It suffers from problems, which is why it's only an honorable mention and didn't actually make it into the list, because it has platforms that are basically unreachable normally, and you have to kind of fidget your way in really specific ways to reach them. It has weird clipping through ground issues. There's no reason the money should hurt you. Stupid crap like that. But for the most part, it plays like it's supposed to. It is relatively original and kind of fun, so it at least deserves a mention, even if it's not going to get on the proper list. And number 1 on most playable, we have a 3-way tie between Space Dreams, Rocket Jock, and Laser League. Now you may remember Space Dreams and Rocket Jock were both on the weirdest list. Laser League was not, but the reason these 3 are on here is because they're incredibly generic space shooters that don't suffer from any major problems, other than boredom. Remember, that's a key component to this category. It doesn't matter if a game is boring, it just has to work. And these 3 do technically work. With other space shooters, we have problems like bullshit enemy placement, dying for no reason, spawning in walls, just blocks appearing in front of you unexpectedly, general glitchy behavior. These 3 do not have that. They're incredibly lame, but they work, and therefore they get the #1 spot on most playable. So, good job, Action 52. You managed to accomplish something. And so on the opposite end of this, we have most unplayable. This one was not quite as limited in scope as most playable, as you can guess, but these are the ones that I'm going to basically call the worst of the worst out of the entire collection. If you want to find something hilarious to make fun of, these are a good one. These are good to pick. If you want to play something and get more than 2 seconds into it and not hate yourself, then you don't want to pick these. But that's why we love them. So, starting at number 5, we have Ooze, the first platformer in the collection, unless you count Illuminator, which I wouldn't. Ooze introduces a lot of the issues of platformers in Action 52. Jumping that doesn't really work properly. Just platforming that doesn't really work because there's no good way to get around to where you need to. You can scroll too far and make platforms disappear off the side of the screen that you need to progress. Enemies appearing in places that you can't kill them or avoid them. And probably most noteworthy of all, the fact that when played on console, the game crashes a couple levels in. Even though there is a contest saying that you need to get to a certain point of the game in order to get a special code to win the cash prize. So it's quite likely that a lot of kids who got stuck with this game tried to play Ooze a lot and did not exactly have a good time with it. So number 4, we have Fuzz Power. Fuzz Power is on this list for a few different reasons. The most immediately obvious when you're playing the game is the questionable hit detection. When you're attacking enemies with your rolling move, sometimes you'll kill them and sometimes they'll hit you. It's very, very up to luck in which way this will work. So, just getting through a level in the first place is already going to be difficult. But if you manage to get to the second level, you are eventually met with a wall that you can't climb because you can't jump high enough, and that's it. That's the end of the game. So, even if you luck out and manage to get this far, the game is literally unplayable beyond that point. Number 3, we have the return of Meong. I have already said everything I can about Meong and why it doesn't work. Even if you understand the rules of the game, it'll still throw something at you that'll kill you anyway. You basically just have to use save state abuse or memorization to get through the level, and that does not make a playable game. So, good job. And number 2, we have a tie between Alfredo, aka Alfred in the Fennec, and Jigsaw. When played on emulator, these are both fairly similar generic platformers in which you go through a level based on either food or carpentry, depending on what you're playing. You have a generic shooting ability, and you platform over very blocky terrain and avoid enemies that spawn in stupid places and move back and forth annoyingly. So they're pretty similar, but what they also share in common is if you're playing on console, these games just crash as soon as you start them up. So, unplayable would be a good way to put that. Surprisingly, they're still not on the number 1 spot, though. And that's because if you play these on emulator, you can play them. Whereas our number 1 cannot. So, before we get to that one, though, we have the honorable mention, which is Dead Ant. Another of the shooting gallery Jupiter scope type game in which you just move across the bottom and shoot stuff that comes down at you. Except in Dead Ant, there's enemies that home in that are basically impossible to shoot at, especially if more than one appears on like opposite ends of the screen. And then there's the kind that just kind of go to the bottom of the screen and hang out there forever, and you can never get rid of them, and they kill you when you touch them. So, Basically, if you either are not perfect at shooting every enemy as it appears, or just get unlucky placement, Dead Ant will kill you through no fault of your own. And for our number one spot, once again being the landslide victor in terms of votes, we have Micro Mike. There are so many things wrong with Micro Mike. The most noteworthy of which is the fact that you are moving at 1,000 miles per hour and can't control this. But while you're doing this, let's take a look at things that are getting in your way. There's walls that are basically impossible to avoid and will shove you backwards, and if you get shoved backwards too far, you die. There's enemies that appear in great numbers and in random locations. There's enemies that basically home in on you. There's things shooting at you when you have no time to react to it. And when you get to the boss at the end, if you somehow manage to, just through save state abuse most likely, half the time it's in places you can't hit it, and it shoots very slow-moving, homing objects at you that always tend to come in from the side where you can't hit them. So, this is, I believe Micro Mike is the only game out of the 52 that I didn't complete for reasons other than boredom. There were games that I just couldn't stand going through any further because of how tedious and annoying they were. Some of them did get to a point of bullshit difficulty just because of the way that the enemies spawned, and I didn't feel like constantly reloading to get a lucky shot at them. But Micro Mike is just basically impossible to play. And so we are now at our final category, which is another kind of vague one, but I feel like this is a good one to wrap it up with. When I originally put up the poll, I called this one easiest to make fun of. I'm going to say it's a cross between that and most infamous. Basically, if you don't really know much about Action 52, but have heard of the game before, or have like watched the AVGN review and then never touched anything with it again since then, this is probably the stuff you're going to remember from it. And I'm exempting Cheetah Men from this list because it was designed specifically to be like the noteworthy game of the collection. Like, it's on the title screen, it got a sequel, it has like the intro sequence and all that, so it kind of wins by default, and these are going to be the ones that come close to matching its legacy. So number 5, showing up yet again in this list, we have Myeong. I have nothing else to say about this one. I've talked about it twice already. It's a stupid freaking game. It's... maybe it's just me, but I always think of this one just as, in terms of unplayable, stupid, generally awful Action 52 games, Myeong is one of the worst, and I love it for that reason. Number 4, Alfred and the Fennec. Specifically for that name. I don't know if anybody outside of my, like, specific, like, circle finds this name that hilarious, but it's... I mean, it's obviously not meant to be called that. When you look at it on the game select screen, it's called Alfredo, and the full name is, like, Alfred and the Fettuccinis or something like that. But just the abbreviation of Alfred and the Fennec is so amazing that you just... it's one of those things that'll stick with you for life. It's so good. And yes, the name is the entire reason that it's on this list. Although the fact that it crashes on boot up is also pretty good. Because if you're going to have a collection of 52 games, you should probably at least make sure that all 52 of them work.
Number 9, Alfredo, or Alfred and the Fennec. Yeah, Fennec. You never heard of Fennec? What happened? Where's the fucking game? Well, there's no game here. What happened? Did the programmers pass out, or did they just figure nobody would check all 52 games? Well, that's $4 wasted, but I guess I can't say I'm really too excited over playing a game called Alfredo, also known as Alfred and the Fennec.
Number 3, Micro Mike. noticing a bit of a trend here. All these have basically shown up on the list already. And that makes sense because this is a generic, like, games that are noteworthy for being bad for various reasons category. And Micro Mike, as we just went through, is certainly full of its fair share of problems. A lot of these are going to be just... I feel like a lot of these are on this list just for the AVGN references. This one's no real exception. But it's just Micro Mike, like, seriously.
Slow the fuck down.
Number 2, we have Star Evil. I think this one gets a special place on this list because it's the second game in the full collection. When you are going through Action 52, not knowing what to expect, and you just play through all the games, you start at the first one, it's boring as shit, but it at least, like, kind of functions, and you're like, okay, it's a 2-player game, whatever. You get into the second one, you boot it up, and within a half a second you're dead, because it just spawns a block in your way. If Star Evil was 30th in the list, and any other space shooter took its place as number 2, I don't think it would be quite as infamous. It would still probably be remembered by some for being just the game that kills you as soon as you start it up. But it just has that special place in history, and I think being number 2 in the list really gave it that. I just remember when I was playing the Flash game N back in high school, I tried to make a level in which it was kind of like a pinball machine, and for it to work, you basically had to hold right at the beginning, or otherwise you'd die. And I got a comment on it saying that it was like Star Evil, because if you don't hold right, you die, and nobody's gonna know that the first time. And so the fact that that was just brought up randomly shows to me that Star Evil is memorable to some. And so our honorable mention for this one is going to be Manchester. Once again, just for one simple reason, and that reason is, like, if you have to sum up Action 52 to somebody, and you're trying to explain it with no visuals, and you're just like, oh, it's this collection of really awful games, and, like, they're all coded really poorly, and the graphics are awful, and the music is awful, and everything's awful, and you're just trying to think of some kind of example, and you can't show them it. You're like, oh, what about that game where you just jump and it goes every time you do it? Because that's something that you can at least explain, and people will be like, what the hell? And so, I just think for that reason, it at least gets a mention. And so, our number 1 spot for most infamous or easiest to make fun of, we have Fuzz Power. Honestly, I couldn't tell you why. This one just got a lot of votes for some reason. Fuzz Power is just one of those games that, it just kind of came and went, as far as I'm concerned. Like, I always knew it was part of Action 52, but it was not one that I really remembered that much personally. But, when you stop and look at it, it really just is perfect for this list, because the character is so badly designed, especially when you lose all the hair. Like, I don't know what they were thinking with this sprite. It's so clearly a penis. And you're playing a game in which the enemies are hair care products, which is just, it's such a stretch. Like, you have the game where you're shooting at baby-related items. Fine, that's dumb. You have Alfredo and Jigsaw, where you're fighting against, and French Baker for that matter, you're fighting against, like, thematically appropriate enemies. This one is just, it's so stupid. You're a character who has a lot of hair, so you attack combs. Just why? Why couldn't it have been something just like a normal enemy? Why did it have to be that? The music is stupid. The sound effects are stupid. The second level ends abruptly when you reach a wall that you can't get past. It's just, Fuzz Power may not in any one category be like the worst of the group, but it kind of encompasses everything, I believe. And so, even though I personally would not give it the number one list, that's what it was voted on, and I'm going to stick with it. I think it's a solid enough choice. Good job, Fuzz Power. You managed to be the worst of the bunch in one respect. And for that, I applaud you. Anyway, this was an interesting experiment. I don't know how this video is going to go. I just talked for 53 minutes, and I'm going to have to edit this together, and it's probably going to be a nightmare. But once it's all finished, I hope you enjoyed it. We have finally seen the end of Action 52. I am never coming back to this crap. And for our next end of month video series, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. And I will see you for that.